Welcome to the art scene. I'm your host, Lila Snow. I've been asked how I got into performing, so I thought I would tell you that my grandmother lived with us, and she was the neighborhood wit. She would say things, and the neighbors would roar with laughter, and I thought, oh, I want that for myself. She'd sit in the window and make comments about the people walking by on East 17th Street in Brooklyn. And she knew a joke to go with almost everything that happened. She also knew old sayings like, if the rich could get the poor to die for them, the poor could earn a good living. Well, I went on to perform at physics conferences. Instead of the usual banquet once in New York City at the Hilton Hotel, actually shared the show with Tom Lehrer, but there was a physicist's wife. I was her secret weapon, and she had me on as the 3,000-year-old woman who knew Archimedes and Leonardo. And this was actually written up in the New York Times by Israel Schenker, an article called Physicist as a Soft Shoe. And then for artists' conferences, I would perform. So for the Women's Caucus for Art, I shared the stage at the National Museum for Women in the Arts with Yvonne Carter, who was chair of the art department at UTC. And she had drummers wearing her paintings. And then my part was a review of Nancy Reagan's My Turn, where she talked about how unfair everybody was to her because she wore a size 4, and how she thought the White House looked shabby, and her son thought maybe she couldn't invite her Hollywood friends there. And the Reagan administration was reducing the free lunch from 10 French fries to 6 French fries, and she was buying dishes that cost $350,000. Well, when I wrote my memoir, I called it with a name like Tuchmacher, because my grandmother's maiden name was Tuchmacher, and I figured with a name like Tuchmacher, it better be funny. Also, when I was having a show, instead of doing a catalog about the show, this was a show of tsunami paintings, because on March 11th, 2011, a tsunami hit Sendai, where we had lived, and the circular shapes of the Fukushima power plants that were washed over. So I used the paintings as the cover, but I did 2 booklets. One is the joke that goes with that, because my grandmother always had a joke that went with that. And one is VIPs I have known and stood next to on a bus. Now, I promised you last time memory tips, and I was trying to understand. I mean, I'm pretty old, so I do forget names, but I was trying to understand why certain names would be blocked for me. For example, I could never think of Romney. Somehow Rumsfeld's name would push Romney out of that part of my brain. And so I devised tricks. For example, I would think baseball, Mitt, and then I would get to Romney instead of Rumsfeld. Also, Watson and Crick won the Nobel Prize for DNA. And actually, they resolved it. There was a missing piece that stopped them. And what it was the double helix. The helical configuration made everything fit into place. And it was Rosalind Franklin who contributed that. She died before the prize, and you have to be alive to share the Nobel Prize. So her mentor, who sent her, they were at Cambridge, he sent her to another college. And look at that, he was the third person to share the prize. And what happened is I knew an artist named Rosalind, and somehow her last name kept me from thinking of Franklin. Well, a friend of ours, a physicist named Jenny Yang, won the Physics Prize sharing it with Tsung-Tao Lee. And he admired Benjamin Franklin. So when he got to the United States, he told everyone that his name was Frank Yang. So I think Rosalind, and then I think Nobel, Frank Yang, and I think Rosalind Franklin. Also, I discovered that if a name is too close to me, like Charlotte and my daughter's best friend Jane, then somehow that blocks the name I'm looking for. The wife of the first director of Fermilab was Jane Wilson, and I could never think of Jane. And as soon as I realized, think friend of Sarah, Jane, and there are two Charlottes I can never remember. Think sister, think Charlotte. So there are ways of tricking yourself into remembering it by hooking it to something. On to some films that have gotten a lot of discussion. The first is The Wife. So here we get into the Nobel Prize because Nobel created the prize because he felt so guilty for inventing dynamite, which killed a lot of people. So the most important person in the Nobel Prize is the physicist. And the film, The Wife, makes the literature person the most important person. And Nobel was not that interested in literature. So here's my complaint about The Wife. It's not that important. It is a film, not a documentary. But the literature person is the most important.
It's all real, darling.
They arrive in Stockholm.
Breathe.
He has events connected to his prize. And
Welcome to Stockholm. We are so delighted to have you here.
I came across some of your stories in the college journal. Beautifully written.
Joe had a very heavy hand as a teacher.
Did he encourage you to keep writing?
This is the biggest.
A writer writes because he has something personal to say.
You write with intelligence, but you're detached.
The characters are supposed to be detached, especially the mother.
My wife doesn't write, thank God. Otherwise, I'd suffer permanent writer's block.
For 8 hours, and her kid's calling, "Mommy, Mommy," but she's got to be there. So she's starting from scratch. She's not Jewish. She went to Smith. How does she know about the Jewish community in Brooklyn, which is what the prize, the laureate, has won the prize for? So that's a little ridiculous. Philip Roth never got the prize. He died. And John Updike never got it. And very much lesser known writers like P.O., an Italian comedian, got it. And so it's really weird that they have her sitting with the king. Chen Kang's wife sat with the King of Sweden when he won it. And the whole front page of the Swedish tabloid had her dancing with the king, who was more than a foot taller, and she called it The King and I. So they get so many. They even have the physicist introduce his 4 sons, who are all working on important things, and they have one of them disproving string theory, which is so stupid. They could have just said he works on string theory. So I'll have something about Saul Bellow next time. But I thought they get so many things wrong. She couldn't possibly have written about that from scratch. On to Greenbook, which got plenty of discussion and complaints. I give it an A for awareness, because very few people knew there was such a thing as a Greenbook telling African Americans where they could stay in the South, and also what gas stations to avoid. And supposedly pianist Shirley, black pianist Shirley, was raised totally differently by his mother. And the Italian driver, the pianist is the boss, he's the driver, decides that he should fix him up because he doesn't know about fried chicken, and throws a piece of fried chicken into the back seat to a man who has never eaten with his food. That's not who he is. It's not up to the driver to decide that he's going to make him into what he thinks a black man should be. The pianist lived in Russia, and he's traveling with 2 Russian string instrumentalists. Now, Marian Anderson performed in the 50s at Constitution Hall, run by the Daughters of the American Revolution, and blacks couldn't buy tickets to her show. But that was one of the few outlets for her to promote her career. And in any case, I'm sure she had a dressing room with a bathroom. So pianist Shirley gets to this town. Also, I don't think he accomplished anything. This was not in the news like the 3 civil rights workers who were killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi, like Selma, Alabama, like sit-ins at lunch counters. So he was risking his life, and he wasn't really accomplishing that much. So I'm going to mention some of the audiobooks. I just heard Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Barack Obama. They both read some of it, so it's a special treat. And I'm going to talk about Fog of War and 3 Identical Strangers. I'll see you next time on the art scene. This is Lila Snow.